Good evening and welcome to this very special edition of Metro Focus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. Tonight we're looking back at the year that was in politics and activism and look forward to what's ahead in 2020 and beyond. We start right here in New York with Mayor Bill de Blasio's brief and underwhelming shot at the White House. In a move that frustrated many New Yorkers, the Democrat launched a presidential run that went nowhere, but which, according to a local tabloid, did have the mayor clocking a 7-hour work month at City Hall. There was also plenty of controversy in Queens, where Amazon reversed its decision to open up a second headquarters in Long Island City after opponents rallied against the tech giant. And in Albany, a wave of progressive Democrats were swept into office and passed some of the country's most far-reaching liberal legislation. Joining us now to break it all down for us is the New York Times Metro politics reporter, Jeffrey Mays. Jeff, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jeff, back in the spring, Mayor de Blasio launched what many at the time predicted would be a doomed presidential campaign. The prediction, as we know, turned out to be correct.
Yes.
Why did the mayor do so badly in that short run, and how did it affect the city?
Well, I think the mayor was just never really able to gain any traction in this race. Throughout various polls, the highest he polled was 1%, and many polls he didn't poll at all. He wasn't able to raise the money. And I think what happened was, he had these grand ideas that he was going to go around the country and talk about all the accomplishments in New York City, his progressive accomplishments, and how he could take them national. But there were just other people already in that lane. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren proposing, Medicare for all and other programs. And the mayor just never picked up traction in the polls with donors or with voters. Even here in New York City, there was a sense that he should not run.
So what were the effects, if any, of that run on the city?
Yeah, I think what has happened, and the criticism has been that there are pressing issues here in New York City that the mayor could have been focusing on while he was running for president. We have issues such as segregation in schools, the closing of Rikers Island, which is a massive plan that needs to be implemented over the next few years. So the thought is that time was lost in dealing with those major issues. Now that the mayor's back, he still has 2 years left in his term. A lot of people are pushing him to try to make sure that there is some sort of major accomplishment in these last 2 years.
But we spoke yesterday, and you mentioned something that struck me, which is that one of the effects, at least on him and in the city, was that ironically, the presidential campaign made him kind of like a premature lame duck, right? That
Absolutely.
Weakened him.
Yeah.
Can he overcome that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, being out of the city opened up lanes for other people to step into, other leaders to step into. So you've seen the city council speaker, Corey Johnson, proposing legislation about, safe streets in the city and other plans that you think would normally come from the mayor. So I think it certainly has pushed up his lame duck status a little bit. But with 2 years left and with many outstanding issues, there certainly is time for the mayor to do something if he wants to.
Now, you mentioned Corey Johnson. He's talking about running for mayor. Who are some of the other, at this early stage, that are front runners, let me put it that way?
Yeah, you have some major candidates out there. You have Eric Adams, who's the Brooklyn borough president, Scott Stringer, who's the city controller. You have Ruben Diaz Jr. in the Bronx, who's the Bronx borough president. You have a woman named Diane Morales in the Bronx, who's the CEO of a nonprofit. And you also have this retired Army General, Lori Sutton, who used to work for Mayor de Blasio, who's trying to run in this sort of more moderate lane. And I think what we're seeing early is that this race is going to be full of candidates. It's going to be very interesting, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth.
So let's talk about Amazon, a big story in 2019. Remind us, what were the biggest issues that caused people to turn against Amazon, and why was the backlash so successful in getting Amazon to pull out?
Yeah, I think it was that Amazon was indicative of the way progressive politics are changing here in New York and the rise of progressive politics. There was concern about the tax breaks that Amazon was going to get, I think about $3 billion in tax breaks. There's also concern about how they treat their current workers and employees and whether there would be fair wages. And then you had people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez coming out strongly against this plan, criticizing Amazon. She really riled up people who were opposed to this plan. And in the end, Amazon decided it just wasn't worth it.
AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is herself one of the big political stories of 2019. Just a year ago, we had her here. She was, an eager freshman congressperson, like many other freshman congressperson coming in. Now she's arguably one of the most powerful politicians in Washington, and certainly one of the most well-known across the country. Explain that. How did that happen?
Well, I think she's influential. You know, I would use the word influential. She has almost 6 million Twitter followers now. And if she puts out an issue, it gets attention. And the same thing happened with Amazon. When she made a call at raising concerns about Amazon, activists rallied around that and used that to hit Amazon, criticize the mayor and the governor for proposing this plan. And in the end, the pressure was just too much. So I would say, you know, her biggest strength is her ability to use social media to gather people around issues. And it's really unheard of for a freshman congressman to have that much influence.
Yeah. So let's turn to Albany. You know, as we know, the Democrats took over control of the legislature, and they're mostly progressive Democrats who did so. And they had a first session that was kind of historic,
right,
momentous, right?
Right.
Tell us what they were able to push through and what they weren't able to push through.
Well, I think, you know, a lot of people consider this session one of the most progressive in the state's history. So what we saw were things like GENDA, which is a law prohibiting discrimination, gender discrimination. We saw new rent laws that had been on the blocks for years in attempts to get those approved. We saw bail reform that came out. So these were major issues. We saw a decriminalization of marijuana, although there was a push to legalize it. That didn't go through. But we saw progress on legislation that had been sitting for several years, and now finally with Democrats in control of both houses and the governorship, those proposals actually made progress in record time.
The head of the New York State Democratic Party, Jay Jacobs, I think is his name, he has some concerns about the left push of the Democrats in Albany. He thinks if they go too far, and that they may be going too far, that next year, where all the assembly seats and all the state Senate seats are up for grabs, they may lose some in rural and urban areas. Do you think he has a point there?
Well, I think right now what you're seeing is a real push between these progressive Democrats and more moderate Democrats. You know, there was a sort of dispute this year between Senators Biaggi and Kevin Parker over, you know, the role of these incoming progressive Democrats who are really pushing for change. So, yeah, there is some concern within the party about whether they were going too far left too quickly, but with the successes that these progressive Democrats have had, it's going to really be hard to rein them back in, because now, you know, they came in and, as I said, they pushed legislation that had been sitting for years. So I don't see that battle easing up anytime soon, and I think that's something to watch in the coming year.
In the last 20 or 30 seconds that we have left, when we invite you back next year at this time, what are the issues that you think, political issues, that will have dominated? I know the presidential political election will be, but here locally in New York.
Yeah, I think marijuana legalization is going to be huge. There's a big question about who's going to benefit from marijuana legalization. A lot of legislators have raised issues on whether minorities should benefit in terms of having records expunged, being able to financially benefit from the sale of marijuana. I think there's also a big question with the presidential election, depending who's at the top of the ticket, what is going to be the direction in the state? If you have a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, that's certainly going to embolden progressives. If you get someone like a Joe Biden, more moderate Democrat, you could see Governor Cuomo gaining even more influence.
All right, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us and talking about this issue.
Thank you.